The next question is from the audience. Do you think the U.S. should be encouraging democracy abroad, and if so, to what extent? To Dana.
That's mine. Actually, I do. Again, I ran against Nancy Pelosi and Cindy Sheehan in the last election, and I remember there was a picture that was very important to me as I ran that race. And it was a picture, and I'm sure you probably all remember, it was an iconic picture of a woman with her burqa off her face with a big smile, and she was holding up her purple finger. Now, they had a 97% rate, 97% participation rate in democracy. I think that same year in California, the number of voters we had was something like 38% of the electorate in the primary, and about 60% in that year of our own citizens in our election. So I think there is a place for democracy. I do too. I remember I attended something at Stanford, and I remember one of the speakers there said, the truth of the matter is, in the Middle East, we've always said, just give us your oil, do what you want with your people. And I think at some point that is something that has been addressed, and I think that we're seeing that as tough as it's been, Iraq is rising to the challenge, and I think Afghanistan will too. They're having their problems, but every new democracy has those problems, and I think that democracy throughout the world is the best solution, because as citizens become more in control of their lives, they do not let these despots and dictators do many of the things that we're facing right now with countries like Iran and Venezuela, et cetera.
John?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Arthur. Yes, I do think we can encourage democracy abroad, just not through force. We can do it by example, but this making the world safe for democracy and building democracy I don't think it should be the American foreign policy, and frankly, it is not the U.S., it should not be the Republican foreign policy. I mean, this making the world safe for democracy is straight out of Woodrow Wilson era progressivism. It is not what this country was founded on. And our party has a long tradition of not participating in that sort of foreign policy. We stand today in, of all buildings, the one named after Hiram Johnson. Hiram Johnson was not only a Republican, that's right, we have a Republican building named in San Francisco, but he was also the governor of California, and he was also the senator from this great state. And he also holds the distinction of being the only senator to have voted against joining the League of Nations and against joining the United Nations. Our history of non-interventionism in this party is long and deep. It is what we should follow, and at the end of the day, we should also listen to Ronald Reagan's comment to us, which was to be that shining city on the hill. And if we do that, we'll encourage a lot more democracies through peace than we will through force.
Okay, 1 minute.
I think there have been many cases in our history that we have had to respond with force, and democracies have been built from that. Certainly, Japan and Germany were occupied by us, and the Marshall Plan, much like we're doing in Afghanistan, building up a country so that it can stand on its own without a totalitarian government, has a place. So I do think, I still believe that we can spread democracy in many ways, but sometimes it has to be done with force.
Okay, we had a question on free trade agreements, which was also one that I had, so I'll rephrase it this way. Would you support renewal of free trade agreements like NAFTA, even if it was clear that significant jobs would be lost? John?
Yeah, I'm not so sure that that not renewing NAFTA would result in job losses. I'm not an expert on it, but from what I've read, NAFTA is a far more a managed trade agreement than it is a free trade agreement. I have a deep commitment and a big believer in free trade. Free trade creates wealth. Isolationism does not. If isolationism worked, North Korea would be the wealthiest country in the world. But free trade works. Unfortunately, the NAFTA trade agreement limits things. It allows certain people to get special deals, and I think that it can be reworked, and I think we can have a much better framework for trade around the world.
Yes, I think what we saw in NAFTA with these special deals is much like what we see in Congress and what everyone's so upset about. I think that in the last year, especially, we've come as a country to understand that we do have to be able to understand the laws, things like NAFTA, agreements like NAFTA, that we have to be able to have them be transparent. That has been promised to us, but it has not yet been delivered. So I too believe in free trade. I also will plan to attack Nancy Pelosi on her refusal to work on CAFTA, which is the Colombian Free Trade Act, because Colombia has been a very good ally of ours. They have done great work in doing away with their drug trade, and they expected to be rewarded with trade with our country, and Nancy Pelosi has held that up basically for the unions and the jobs they think they will lose. But I too believe that free trade is a good thing and that it will enhance us, and we will have different kinds of jobs than the jobs that we send to other countries.
Okay, there was a question from the audience also. I'll phrase it this way. This question's about our policy towards Israel. What should be the U.S. policy towards Israel, the proposed Palestinian state, and more immediately, new settlements in the West Bank? Dana?
My understanding is that basically the Israeli government has given up far more than the Palestinians have, and we're at a point now where the United States government is pretty much siding with the Palestinians and not so much with Israel. Just a few weeks ago, we saw that President Obama would not even be photographed with Benjamin Netanyahu. That was a very disturbing situation for Israel, and it sends a very bad mixed message. There have been agreements in place, and again, it is the Israelis that have given far more than the Palestinians. What I think they're most concerned about right now is that they're going to have a land that they're not even sure they're going to have defensible borders. So these are things that will have to be worked out, but I think it's very important to understand that the message that the current administration is giving as regarded support for Israel has been very troubling to not just Israel, but other of our allies, I think.
Yeah, I think Israel, of course, is an important ally, and it's an important democracy in the Middle East. And as I mentioned before, I think that we do far more to hurt Israel in its position by putting the handcuffs on it. We're constantly telling it what to do. And I have to admit, I'm not a big fan of foreign aid, but in this context, I think if we're going to give foreign aid to Israel, we should give it with no strings attached. We give aid here in this country to lots of folks, and we don't tell them how to live their lives. Israel is filled with tough, capable, smart people. I think people who want to live in peace. I was very encouraged by Benjamin Netanyahu's interview with George Stephanopoulos over the weekend, where he talked primarily about peace and that the fact that Israel wants peace. If we give them trade, I think this sort of paternalistic relationship where we come in and tell them where they can build settlements is not going to ultimately work. If Israel decides that they want to build settlements, that is their business. They have to live with the ramifications. I think they know where they're going with that, and it's up to them to make that decision. So I say what we should do is just, again, take the handcuffs off, let them decide how they're going to build things, and they'll live with the consequences.
Yeah, my understanding is that the only aid we now give Israel, we no longer give economic aid for other things, but just for military. So, yes, I think they should be given a certain amount of freedom. But again, I think it's very important that they know, and the message is given from Washington, that we are their allies and that we will stick by them, and that we will not forego their best interests in this reaching an agreement for a two-state settlement.
Thank you. The final question.